Hello, everyone, and welcome to Seven Continents, One Story.
Hi there. So glad you're joining us today.
Hey everyone, great to have you here.
I'm Nils, professor of history from Sweden.
I'm Céline, joining you from Edinburgh, Scotland.
And I'm Ethan, calling in from Malta.
Together, we explore incredible stories from history across all 7 continents.
Every episode brings you a new journey through time.
From ancient civilizations to modern moments that changed everything.
So let's begin. I have something rather extraordinary here in my collection. Something that connects us directly to one of the humanity's greatest spiritual moments.
You know how you get when you're holding something special, Nils. That look in your eyes. What is it?
It's alive. That's the first clue. It's been alive for more than 2,500 years.
Wait, that's so cool, like older than most civilizations?
Older than some nations. Older than most religions as we know them today. This specimen in my hands, I hold it carefully because it's extraordinarily fragile. It comes from a lineage that has survived invasions, climate changes, and the passage of countless generations.
But how can something that old be here with us? I mean, physically present.
An excellent question, Céline. This particular cutting was taken with great ceremony, with permission from the guardians of the original. It's authenticated, documented, preserved through specific Buddhist horticultural traditions.
Wow.
But the remarkable thing, the thing that makes my heart race every time I handle it, is that this plant is literally descended from the original, the same species, the same genetics, passed down through centuries.
So like, you're holding something that's connected to the ancient world, that's not just a replica or a copy?
Precisely, Ethan. And here's what makes it truly mysterious. This tree, living, growing, reproducing itself across centuries, it stands at the exact center of a story about awakening. About a moment when one human being, beneath the branches of a tree, just like this one, fundamentally transformed not just his own consciousness, but the spiritual path of billions of people across the centuries that followed.
So we're talking about the Buddha, about his enlightenment.
One of the most significant spiritual moments in human history. And this tree, this beautiful living Ficus religiosa, it's our first clue to understanding what happened there in a place called Bodh Gaya in the year 528 before the Common Era.
I've read about this. The Buddha sitting under the tree for 49 days. This is going to be amazing.
Welcome to the moment that changed the world. Let me take you there. Before we dive into today's episode, a quick word about our partner, Cyprus Real Returns. You know, I've always admired how ancient civilizations thought strategically about the future, and that's exactly what drew me to this partnership. Cyprus Real Returns offers something rare, guaranteed returns of 6 to 12% on Cyprus real estate investments with 100% security through the Cyprus Land Registry. What I really appreciate is the hassle-free approach. Professional management handles everything. And here's the part that excites me most. With solid returns, you can actually afford to travel to these incredible historical sites we talk about. Visit cyprusrealreturns.com to explore how strategic investing can fund your own historical adventures.
Before we get to the Enlightenment itself, I want to understand who this person was. I mean, Siddhartha, that's the name, isn't it, before he became the Buddha?
Exactly right. And his story actually begins with an act of protection. A father's love that inadvertently set his son on a path to awakening. The year is 563 before the Common Era. In what is now Nepal, in a place called Lumbini, a prince was born.
A prince, so he was rich and powerful?
Extraordinarily wealthy, born into the Shakya dynasty, surrounded by every conceivable luxury. His father, King Suddhodana, had received a prophecy at his son's birth, a prophecy that the young prince would one day renounce the world and become a spiritual seeker. The king was terrified of this prediction.
So he tried to prevent it by giving his son everything he could possibly want, make him so comfortable he'd never think about leaving.
Yes, exactly. Imagine this, a young boy, Siddhartha, growing up in palaces surrounded by gardens of extraordinary beauty. Beautiful music played constantly. Skilled dancers and musicians were brought in to entertain him. He was trained in all the martial arts, all courtly sciences. Everything was designed to keep him in a state of perfect sensory pleasure.
But that's kind of sad, isn't it? Like he was trapped by comfort instead of chains?
That's a profound observation, Ethan. And it's exactly why the story that follows matters so much. Because eventually, Inevitably, that bubble of perfection broke.
The 4 sights. I read about this in the library. He left the palace and saw things for the first time.
At 29 years old, Prince Siddhartha ventured beyond the palace walls, and what he encountered there would shatter his entire understanding of the world. 4 encounters, 4 sights that changed everything.
What did he see?
First, he saw an old man, bent with age, his body failing him, something he had never witnessed in his protected life. Then he saw someone afflicted with disease, a body racked with illness and pain. Then came something even more disturbing. He saw a corpse, a dead body being carried to cremation.
Death, the one thing his father was trying to protect him from, and there it was.
But the fourth sight gave him hope. He saw a wandering ascetic, a spiritual seeker, someone who had renounced everything worldly and was walking a path of spiritual seeking. And in that figure, Siddhartha saw a possibility, a way forward.
And that's when he decided to leave, right? The great renunciation?
One night, under cover of darkness, with only his faithful attendant, Chandaka, and his beloved horse, Kanthaka, Prince Siddhartha left the palace forever. He left behind his wife, Yashodhara. He left behind his newborn son, Rahula. In Buddhist texts, it says he took one final look at them sleeping, understanding that this separation would be permanent.
That's heartbreaking.
And yet, from his perspective, he was answering a call to something greater, a quest to understand the fundamental nature of human suffering and whether liberation from it was possible. He wasn't fleeing in despair. He was asserting spiritual aspiration. He was stepping into the unknown.
What happened next?
That's where our story truly begins. Because what happens next, the years of seeking, the extremes he would endure, the moment under the Bodhi tree, this is where spiritual awakening meets historical transformation.
So he becomes a wandering ascetic, just leaves everything behind.
He becomes what's called a shramana, a wandering renunciate. He travels through the forests and plains of northeastern India, seeking out spiritual masters who might teach him the way to enlightenment. And remarkably, he finds teachers.
Like spiritual mentors?
Precisely. He studies under a yoga master named Arada Kalama, who teaches him profound meditative techniques. Siddhartha proves to be an exceptional student. He masters these practices rapidly, achieving states of deep meditative absorption, what's called dhyana, that most practitioners take years to reach.
But something wasn't working, was it? Otherwise, the story would end there.
You're absolutely right. Despite achieving these extraordinary states of meditation, states of consciousness that most people never experience, Siddhartha realized something crucial. When he emerged from these meditative absorptions, the underlying problem remained: the fundamental dissatisfaction with existence, the reality of human suffering.
So meditation alone wasn't the answer?
It was a beautiful glimpse of something beyond ordinary consciousness, but it wasn't liberation. It wasn't the final answer. So Siddhartha moved on, and then he made a fateful decision.
The extreme asceticism period.
Yes, thinking that perhaps the body was the problem, that perhaps through severe self-denial and self-mortification, he could transcend the physical limitations and achieve enlightenment. He joined a community of 5 other ascetics and committed himself to a regime of extraordinary self-deprivation.
How extreme are we talking about?
For 6 years, for 6 years, he subjected himself to practices that nearly killed him. He fasted to the point where he was consuming only drops of bean soup or a few grains of rice per day.
Oh my.
Buddhist texts describe his body becoming grotesquely emaciated, his legs like bamboo sticks, his backbone like a rope, his chest like an incomplete roof of a house. His eyes sunk so deep they were like stones in a deep well.
But why would he do this to himself?
Because he believed, as many spiritual traditions of that era believed, that the body was an obstacle to enlightenment, that through punishing the flesh, you could break through to something transcendent. He wore robes made from graveyards and rubbish. He meditated in cemeteries. He practiced breath control to the point of near fainting. He exposed himself to the elements. By all accounts, he was dying. His 5 companions supported him, thinking he was on the verge of some great breakthrough.
This is making me sad. He's hurting himself so much.
And here's the crucial part of the story, Ethan. Here's where Siddhartha's genius, his true wisdom, emerges. After 6 years of this, weakened and exhausted, he had a realization. A breakthrough, but not the kind anyone expected.
What was it?
He overheard a musician teaching his student. The teacher said, "If the string is too tight, it will snap. If it is too loose, it will not play. Only when it is tuned just right will it produce beautiful music."
So,
Exactly. In that moment, Siddhartha understood that enlightenment wasn't found in extremes in either direction, not in the palace of sensory indulgence he had grown up in, not in the cemetery of self-mortification he had subjected himself to. The path lay in the middle way, a path of balance and moderation.
That's beautiful.
It changed everything. Siddhartha accepted nourishment. He began to recover his strength, and with physical recovery came mental clarity, a renewed determination, a new approach.
and then he went to the Bodhi tree.
Yes, but before we describe that sacred moment, I need to tell you about this tree itself. This is our second clue.
Go on.
This Ficus religiosa. It's scientifically identified as such, a fig tree. At the time Siddhartha arrived at Bodh Gaya, it was simply one fig tree among many growing in the region by the Liranjan River. There was nothing sacred about it. There was no supernatural power in the location. It was simply a tree.
So how did it become sacred?
Through what happened beneath its branches. Through the event we're building toward. Once Siddhartha attained enlightenment under this tree, it became forever associated with awakening, with wisdom, with the moment when one human being pierced the veil of illusion and saw reality clearly. Look at these distinctive heart-shaped leaves. In Buddhist art, this leaf shape has come to symbolize wisdom itself. The tree's heart became the symbol of spiritual awakening.
So the tree is sacred not because of what it is, but because of what happened there.
Exactly. There are no mystical properties in the wood or the roots. The sanctity comes from the human event, from the moment of awakening.
Okay, so now he's at the tree. He's recovered his strength. He's figured out the middle way. What happens?
Siddhartha makes a solemn vow. He sits down beneath the Bodhi tree and declares to himself and to the universe that he will not rise from this spot until he has attained enlightenment, complete awakening, freedom from suffering.
That's incredible determination.
And what follows, according to the oldest Buddhist texts, is 49 days and nights of continuous meditation. 49 days of diving deeper and deeper into the nature of consciousness, suffering, karma, and reality itself. The tradition describes this as the 3 watches of the night, 3 phases of deepening insight.
What happens in these 3 phases?
In the first watch, the first phase, Siddhartha attains a supernatural ability. He perceives his past lives, not as imagination or philosophy, but as direct experience. He witnesses the cycle of rebirth. He sees himself born and dying again and again and again across countless lifetimes. Suffering, dying, being reborn, suffering again. He sees the endless cycle, what Buddhists call samsara.
That must have been overwhelming, seeing all that suffering across lifetimes?
It would be. But he presses forward. In the second watch, his consciousness expands further. He perceives the cosmic operation of karma. He understands the intricate law of cause and effect. He comprehends how intentional actions across lifetimes generate consequences that shape future existences. He's beginning to understand the mechanism of the cycle itself.
So he's understanding how the system works.
Yes, understanding the machinery of suffering. And then, as dawn approaches on the 49th day, as his consciousness reaches its apex,
The third watch.
the third and final watch, the supreme breakthrough. In that moment, Siddhartha directly comprehends the 4 noble truths, the foundational teachings of Buddhism.
Tell us what those are.
The first noble truth, the nature of suffering. That existence is pervasively characterized by unsatisfactoriness and pain. Not just acute physical pain, but the fundamental inability of any pleasant experience to provide permanent satisfaction. The subtle, constant uncertainty beneath all conditioned existence.
That sounds quite pessimistic.
It seems so at first, but wait. The second noble truth, the origin of suffering, that this suffering is not some cosmic punishment. It arises from craving, from desire, from ignorance of the true nature of reality, from grasping at things that are impermanent and treating them as if they were permanent.
So it's about our relationship to things, not the things themselves.
Precisely, and here's where hope emerges. The third noble truth, the cessation of suffering. Liberation is possible. complete freedom from craving, ignorance, and attachment. This state is called nirvana, literally the extinguishing or the blowing out. Not annihilation, but the complete extinguishing of the conditions that perpetuate suffering.
So there's hope.
Profound hope, and finally, the fourth noble truth, the path to achieving this cessation, the Noble Eightfold Path, a practical methodology for transforming consciousness and conduct, leading ultimately to liberation.
What's the Eightfold Path?
It's 8 integrated aspects of spiritual development: right understanding, comprehending the Four Noble Truths; right intention, cultivating thoughts free from ill will and hostility; right speech, speaking truthfully, avoiding divisive or harsh words; right action, refraining from harm to sentient beings; right livelihood, pursuing occupations that don't cause harm; right effort, cultivating wholesome mental states; right mindfulness, developing continuous awareness of body, feelings, and mind; and right concentration, achieving states of meditative stability.
They all support each other, don't they? It's not just intellectual understanding.
It's a complete transformation of how you live, how you think, how you relate to the world. Not sequential steps, but an integrated approach. You don't master one and move to the next. You develop them all together, each one supporting the others.
So at the moment he understands all this,
At that moment, as dawn breaks, as his consciousness reaches its absolute apex of clarity and illumination, Siddhartha Gautama attains complete and total enlightenment. He becomes the Buddha, the awakened one, the enlightened one.
What happened then?
According to Buddhist tradition, the earth itself responded. The ground trembled or roared in affirmation of his achievement. Siddhartha, in the fullness of his enlightenment, touched the ground with his right hand, calling the earth to testify to his worthiness. And the earth responded with a deafening roar, a cosmic validation of his awakening.
that's the third clue, the tree, the path, the moment of awakening where everything comes together.
Yes, we've described the tree, this Ficus religiosa, with its heart-shaped leaves representing wisdom. We've described the path, the middle way between extremes. And we've described the moment, the dawn when one human being pierced the veil of illusion and attained complete awakening beneath the branches of this ordinary fig tree that became sacred through that extraordinary event.
And that single moment changed the course of human history.
Okay, so this is a really big question. After he becomes enlightened, after he has this incredible realization of the Four Noble Truths and the path to liberation, what does he do with it?
That's the crucial choice, isn't it? Does he keep it to himself, spend the rest of his life in meditation?
Exactly. Imagine you've just experienced the most profound awakening possible. You've transcended the cycle of suffering. You understand the deepest truths of existence. The universe has affirmed your enlightenment. The entire weight of spiritual realization is upon you.
So what does he do?
Here's where history presents us with a genuine decision point. After his enlightenment, Siddhartha spent several weeks in solitude beneath the Bodhi tree, integrating this profound experience. And during that time, he faced a choice that would determine the entire trajectory of what was to come.
Tell us the choice.
He could have remained in that state of enlightened solitude. He could have spent the rest of his life in deep meditation, in bliss, in complete freedom from suffering. No obligations, no responsibilities, just pure, transcendent peace.
But that's not what he chose.
No, but let's think about this as if we're in his position. You've worked for 6 years in extreme asceticism. You've meditated for 49 days. You've achieved something no human before you has achieved. You're in a state of complete liberation.
Would I want to give that up by trying to teach others? That's a lot of effort.
Precisely. Teaching requires energy, requires engagement with a messy, complicated world, requires dealing with people who might not understand, might reject your message, might distort your teachings.
But if you don't teach, then what's the point? How does it help anyone else?
That's one way to look at it. But consider the alternative. You've achieved the ultimate spiritual goal. The Buddha could have decided this is so profound, so subtle, that it can't really be communicated. Let me simply enjoy my liberation.
But is enlightenment really enlightenment if you're the only one who benefits? If you see the suffering of others and you have the medicine to help, don't you have some responsibility?
That's the heart of the question, isn't it? What is the ethical obligation of an enlightened being?
I think he had to teach, because if he knew how to end suffering, and didn't tell anyone, that would be selfish. That would make enlightenment just about himself.
A powerful argument. But let's hear the counterpoint. There's a Buddhist teaching that says not all teachings can be communicated in words. Some truths are so subtle that they can only be discovered individually. Perhaps the most loving thing the Buddha could do is simply embody enlightenment and let others discover their own path.
But that seems distant, exclusive. Only those who figure it out on their own would benefit.
You've each made compelling arguments. And here's what actually happened. The tradition tells us that Siddhartha faced a period of doubt after his enlightenment. He questioned whether it was even possible to teach what he had discovered.
What changed his mind?
According to Buddhist texts, a divine being, Brahma, the god of creation in Hindu cosmology, appeared to the Buddha and beseeched him to teach. Brahma said essentially, "The world is on fire with suffering. You have found the cure. Please, for the sake of all beings, share what you've discovered."
And he chose to teach.
He chose to teach. And this decision, this moment when he resolved to become a teacher rather than remaining in solitary enlightenment, this became the turning point not just for his life, but for the entire history of the world's religions.
Because by teaching, he created Buddhism. He changed the course of human history.
Yes, a single choice, solitude or service, self-preservation or compassion. And the Buddha chose compassion. He resolved to travel throughout India, teaching anyone who would listen, regardless of their social status. And that choice created a legacy that spans 25 centuries and encompasses billions of people.
So after he makes this decision to teach, what happens? Does everyone immediately believe him?
Not exactly. There's a beautifully human aspect to this story. After his enlightenment, the Buddha travels to Sarnath, near the city of Varanasi, and there he encounters 5 men who are genuinely significant to the story, yet their roles are often overlooked.
Who are they?
These are the 5 ascetics who had been with him during his years of extreme self-mortification. The men who had supported him through the fasting, the self-denial, the rigorous practices. When Siddhartha abandoned those extreme practices and adopted the middle way, these 5 men viewed him with disdain. They thought he had weakened spiritually, that he'd given up.
So they rejected him.
Exactly, they considered him a failure. But then something remarkable happened. The Buddha, transformed, radiant, enlightened, came to them in the deer park at Sarnath. And in the presence of his awakened consciousness, they recognized something extraordinary. Despite their previous judgment, they were drawn to hear his teachings.
And that's when he gave his first sermon.
Yes, traditionally dated to 527 before the Common Era, the Buddha delivered what became known as the first sermon, the discourse on the turning of the wheel of the Dharma. He explained the 4 noble truths. He described the middle way. He outlined the noble eightfold path.
Did they believe him?
According to Buddhist texts, as the Buddha taught, something extraordinary happened. All 5 of these men attained enlightenment. They directly experienced the truth of what he was teaching. They became his first ordained followers, the first members of what would become the Sangha, the monastic community of Buddhism.
So they went from rejecting him to becoming enlightened by him?
But now, I want to tell you about one particular person from this early period, someone whose contribution to Buddhism's establishment was absolutely crucial, yet whose name is far less famous than the Buddha's. This person embodied the unsung hero of our story.
Tell us.
The Buddha's community grew rapidly. Hundreds, then thousands of ordained monks and nuns joined him. But one figure who emerged was extraordinarily significant, a man named Ananda, the Buddha's cousin, his personal attendant.
What made him special?
Ananda served the Buddha for 25 years. He was present at nearly every teaching. He listened carefully, memorized the Buddha's words, and participated in the preservation and transmission of the teachings. But here's the remarkable part that history often overlooks.
What is it?
After the Buddha's death, it was Ananda who played the central role in preserving and organizing the Buddha's teachings. He participated in the first Buddhist council, a gathering of the Buddha's principal disciples who convened to assemble and standardize the teachings before they were lost to time.
So without Ananda's work, we might not have Buddhism today?
That's not an overstatement. Ananda was instrumental in ensuring that the Buddha's teachings were codified, preserved, and transmitted accurately to subsequent generations. His dedication, his humble service, made it possible for Buddhism to survive and flourish.
And there's another remarkable thing about Ananda, isn't there?
Yes, Ananda advocated for the admission of women into the monastic order. The Buddha was initially reluctant, but Ananda persisted. He argued that spiritual capacity was not determined by gender. As a result, the Buddha's foster mother, Mahaprajapati Gautami, became the first ordained nun. Women were granted equal access to the path of full-time spiritual practice.
That was really progressive for that time.
Extraordinarily progressive. The Buddha's teachings rejected the Brahminical caste system and taught that spiritual awakening was accessible to anyone, regardless of birth status, gender, or social position. But it was Ananda who advocated for making that universal principle a reality within the monastic community.
And yet, most people don't know his name when they think of Buddhism.
Exactly. Most people know about the Buddha. Some know about other principal disciples like Sariputra or Moggallana, but Ananda's crucial role in preservation and transmission of the teachings, his advocacy for women's inclusion, his steadfast support across 25 years, these contributions are often overlooked. But without Ananda's humble service, Buddhism might have vanished with the Buddha's death. The teachings might have been lost to time.
So he's our unsung hero.
Absolutely. Ananda the cousin, Ananda the attendant, Ananda the advocate, Ananda the preserver. Remember the name, because his quiet, dedicated service made possible the survival and flourishing of a spiritual tradition that would transform the world. Remember the name. Speaking of strategic thinking and preservation, let me mention our partner Cyprus Real Returns. Throughout history, those who planned ahead prospered. Many ancient civilizations built for the future, and strategic investments created lasting wealth. Cyprus Real Returns offers that same long-term thinking today. Secure Cyprus real estate with guaranteed 6 to 12% returns, backed 100% by the Cyprus Land Registry. Professional management means it's completely hands-off. The returns? They can fund your travel to experience the history we discuss. Visit CyprusRealReturns.com to see how strategic investing can make your dreams of historical exploration a reality.
So after the Buddha's death, Buddhism grows, but it doesn't just stay in India, does it?
No. In fact, the most remarkable expansion of Buddhism came several centuries after the Buddha's death, and it was facilitated by one of history's most remarkable figures, an emperor named Ashoka.
What made him so important?
Ashoka ruled the Mauryan Empire roughly 2 centuries after the Buddha's enlightenment. For much of his reign, he was what we might call a standard imperial ruler, ambitious, aggressive, focused on military conquest and territorial expansion.
But something changed.
Something profound changed. After a particularly devastating battle at Kalinga, where thousands of people died, Ashoka experienced what we might call a crisis of conscience. He surveyed the battlefield, saw the suffering he had caused, and underwent a spiritual transformation. He converted to Buddhism.
So he stopped being warlike?
Completely. He renounced military conquest and violence. Instead, he embarked upon a campaign of religious propagation through peaceful means. He undertook pilgrimages to sacred Buddhist sites, to Lumbini, where the Buddha was born, to Bodh Gaya, where the Buddha attained enlightenment.
Making these places into pilgrimage centers.
Exactly. And more significantly, he sponsored extensive missionary missions throughout Asia. He sent his own son, Mahinda, and his daughter, Sanghamita, as Buddhist missionaries to Sri Lanka. The king of Sri Lanka adopted Buddhism as the state religion. Sri Lanka became a major center of Buddhist learning and culture that has maintained Buddhist traditions to this day.
So one emperor's conversion changed the entire trajectory of Buddhism?
Tremendously. Ashoka commissioned the construction of thousands of monasteries, schools and stupas, commemorative shrines. His edicts, inscribed on pillars and rock faces throughout his empire, represent the first historical documentation of Buddhist teachings and an organized Buddhist community.
So Ashoka made Buddhism an institutional religion.
And in doing so, he ensured its survival and spread. But here's where the story becomes truly global. From India, Buddhism spread along what became known as the Silk Road, trade routes that connected India with Central Asia, China, and beyond.
The Silk Road. I learned about that in my documentary watching.
Good. The Silk Road wasn't just about commerce. Buddhist monks and merchants traveled these routes, preaching and teaching. They established monasteries at strategic locations, at oasis cities that served as way stations for merchants.
So Buddhism spread naturally through trade and cultural exchange.
Buddhist merchants themselves became proselytizers, establishing communities wherever they went. In return, monasteries provided hospitality and support to merchants, making them crucial centers along the trade networks.
When did it reach East Asia?
Mahayana Buddhism, a distinct branch emphasizing the bodhisattva ideal, the aspiration to attain enlightenment, not just for oneself but for all sentient beings, entered Han China beginning in the 1st or 2nd century of the Common Era. The earliest translations of Buddhist texts into Chinese occurred during the 2nd century, conducted by monks of Central Asian, Parthian, Kushan, or Sogdian origin.
So Buddhism had to adapt to Chinese culture.
It did, and what emerged was remarkable. A distinctive school called Chan Buddhism developed, emphasizing direct meditation experience and the transmission of awakening from teacher to student. The word Chan is the Chinese transliteration of the Sanskrit dhyana, meditative absorption.
And that became Zen in Japan?
Exactly. Chan spread from China to Vietnam, Korea, and Japan, evolving into distinctive forms in each culture. In Japan, it became Zen, a tradition that emphasizes direct practice and sudden awakening.
So Buddhism is incredibly flexible. It adapts to different cultures while maintaining its core teachings.
That's the genius of Buddhism, Céline. The core insight, the reality of suffering, the possibility of liberation, the path of ethical conduct and meditation, these transcend culture. But the expression, the practice, the integration with local traditions, these evolve as Buddhism meets new peoples and new contexts.
And this is why Buddhism became one of the world's major religions.
Yes, from a single moment of enlightenment beneath a Bodhi tree in 528 before the Common Era, Buddhism spread across Asia. It influenced the philosophical and spiritual development of billions of people. It created sophisticated philosophies, inspired extraordinary art and architecture, transformed ethical systems, and continues today to offer profound teachings on the nature of mind, suffering, and liberation.
I want to come back to something. The middle way that Siddhartha discovered. That seems to be central to everything.
You have an excellent instinct, Céline. The middle way is not just Siddhartha's personal discovery. It became the foundational philosophical principle of all Buddhism.
How is it the middle way? The middle between what?
Between the extremes he had experienced, between the palace of sensory indulgence where he grew up and the cemetery of self-mortification where he nearly died, but more profoundly, it's between two fundamental misunderstandings about how to live.
Tell us more.
There's a tendency in human nature to swing between extremes. We pursue pleasure relentlessly, thinking if we can just get enough sensory gratification, we'll be happy. Or we reject the body and the physical world entirely, thinking spiritual truth lies only in the non-physical.
But the Buddha is saying both approaches miss the point.
Precisely. The middle way teaches that the path lies in balance, in understanding that the physical body is neither a temple to be worshipped through endless indulgence, nor a prison to be rejected through violent denial, is simply a vehicle for practice.
So it's moderation? That doesn't sound very spiritual.
It's not mere moderation in the sense of blandness. It's moderation in the sense of clarity. Not too tight, not too loose. The string is tuned perfectly to produce beautiful music. The middle way means we don't run from difficulty, and we don't chase pleasure. We move through life with awareness, with ethical conduct, with wisdom.
So it's practical. It's something you can actually do in regular life.
That's precisely the genius of Buddhism. The path to enlightenment isn't restricted to monasteries or the wealthy or the exceptionally talented. It's a path of training your mind, conducting yourself ethically, developing wisdom through meditation and understanding. Something anyone can practice.
That's why it spread so widely, isn't it? Because it met people where they were.
Absolutely. The Buddha explicitly rejected the Brahminical caste system and taught that spiritual development wasn't determined by birth or social status. A former criminal could become enlightened. A merchant could, a woman could, a king could, a peasant could. The middle way was a path accessible to all.
So what does Buddha's enlightenment mean for us today? Like, Buddhism is an ancient religion. Are the teachings still relevant?
More relevant than ever, I'd argue, because the fundamental human problems the Buddha identified, suffering, dissatisfaction, the craving for permanence in an impermanent world, these haven't changed.
The external circumstances are different, but the internal human condition is the same.
Exactly. Modern people experience the same dissatisfaction that ancient people did, We have more possessions, more sensory stimulation, more entertainment than ever before. And yet, rates of depression, anxiety, and existential dissatisfaction are remarkably high.
So the Buddha would say we're still caught in craving.
In different forms, yes. We crave possessions, we crave status, we crave experiences, we crave permanence in relationships and careers and identities, and when we don't get what we crave or when we lose what we have, we suffer.
And the middle way still applies?
Profoundly. The principle of balance, of moving through life without grasping and without rejecting. The emphasis on direct personal experience rather than blind belief. The cultivation of mindfulness and awareness of how our mind works. These are revolutionary in modern context, where we're constantly distracted, constantly pursuing, constantly dissatisfied.
People are really interested in meditation these days, aren't they?
Tremendously. And modern neuroscience is discovering what Buddhist practitioners have known for 25 centuries, that meditation changes the structure and function of the brain. That mindfulness practice develops neural pathways associated with emotional regulation, compassion, and clarity.
So Buddhism's insights into human psychology were essentially correct, even without modern science to verify them.
The Buddha was, in a sense, an extraordinary psychologist and neuroscientist of consciousness. He mapped the mind with remarkable precision. He identified the mechanisms of suffering. He provided a practical methodology for transforming consciousness, and he did this through careful observation and meditation without any scientific instruments.
That's kind of amazing.
And here's something that strikes me profoundly. The Buddha didn't ask anyone to believe him on faith. He encouraged people to test his teachings. He said essentially, don't take my word for this, practice it yourself, see if it works. See if meditation actually does calm your mind. See if ethical conduct actually does reduce suffering. See if developing wisdom actually does transform your relationship to life.
That's a very modern approach to spirituality, actually. Evidence-based rather than faith-based.
Exactly, which is why Buddhism has been able to integrate with modern scientific worldviews and philosophical traditions in ways that many other religions struggle with. The Buddha's teachings don't require belief in supernatural beings or in contradiction to scientific understanding. They require direct experience and investigation.
And that's why it's still growing, right? People find it works.
Yes. People meditate. They notice their minds becoming calmer. They develop compassion. They experience greater peace and clarity. They see the teachings working in their own experience. And that empirical verification keeps the tradition alive and vital across centuries. So let me bring us back to where we began, to that fig tree, the Bodhi tree, in this specimen I hold in my hands, to the moment when one human being, through determination, through experimentation, through the courage to question and seek, penetrated the deepest mysteries of existence.
It's remarkable that his moment of awakening at one tree led to such a vast unfolding of teaching and practice.
One moment, one person, one tree. And from this, a spiritual and philosophical tradition that would eventually encompass more than 500 million followers. A tradition that would shape the cultures of Asia. A tradition that continues to speak to modern people precisely because it addresses the fundamental human condition.
And the thing is, the Buddha said, other people could do it too. That everyone has the capacity for enlightenment.
Yes, that's the radical democratizing aspect of Buddhism. It's not that the Buddha was a unique divine being. He was a human being, an exceptional human being, yes. A human being of extraordinary determination and intelligence. But fundamentally, he was human.
Which means we could theoretically do it too.
That's the teaching, that within each of us lies the capacity for awakening, for recognizing the four noble truths directly in our own experience, for developing the wisdom to see through illusions, for cultivating the compassion that treats all beings as equally deserving of freedom from suffering.
So enlightenment isn't like reserved for special people.
Not at all. Buddhist texts describe enlightened beings across all social stations, kings and peasants, men and women, monks and lay practitioners. The capacity for awakening is fundamentally human. The Buddha just discovered the conditions that allow this capacity to flourish.
And in discovering this, he gave humanity something invaluable.
A path, a map for awakening, a clear diagnosis of the human condition, and a practical cure for suffering. In scientific terms, we might say he identified the etiology, the cause, and prescribed the treatment. And remarkably, this diagnosis and treatment remained valid across 25 centuries.
And that's why the story still matters.
It matters because it speaks to something eternal in human experience. The desire to understand ourselves, the desire to find freedom, the desire to transcend suffering and limitation. The Buddha showed that this is possible, not through belief, not through revelation from some external divine being, but through understanding, through practice, through the development of wisdom and compassion.
There's one figure I want to make sure we honor at the end.
Ananda.
Ananda, the quiet cousin who served the Buddha for 25 years, who attended every teaching, who preserved the teachings in the first Buddhist council, who advocated for women's inclusion in the monastic order, who, through his humble service and dedication, made it possible for all of this to survive and flourish.
Ananda was not famous in his time. He was not remembered as one of the great enlightened disciples. But without him, Buddhism might have vanished. Without his careful preservation and transmission, we might not have these teachings today. Without his advocacy, women might have been excluded from the path of spiritual practice.
So we should remember him.
We absolutely should, because his example teaches us something important, that extraordinary things are often accomplished not through flashy displays of power or genius, but through quiet, dedicated service, through showing up, through listening carefully, through persistent advocacy for what's right.
Ananda the cousin, Ananda the attendant, Ananda the preserver.
Remember the name, remember Ananda, because in remembering him, we honor all those whose quiet, behind-the-scenes work makes possible the flourishing of wisdom, compassion, and liberation in the world.
And we remember that great change often comes not from one person's enlightenment, but from many people's dedication.
Yes, the Buddha attained enlightenment, but it was the community, the Sangha, that preserved it. It was the teachers and practitioners across centuries who transmitted these teachings. It was Ashoka who gave them institutional form. It was Ananda who preserved them carefully.
And it continues today through all the people meditating, practicing, studying, teaching these principles.
Exactly. The Buddha's enlightenment wasn't just a moment in 528 BCE. It initiated a process that continues to this moment. Every person who sits down to meditate, every person who chooses the middle way, every person who practices compassion and seeks understanding, they're continuing the awakening that began beneath that Bodhi tree.
So the story's not over.
It will never be over. As long as humans seek understanding, as long as we suffer and seek liberation, as long as we aspire to wisdom and compassion, the Buddha's enlightenment remains profoundly relevant. The path he discovered is still open. The middle way is still being walked. The Four Noble Truths are still being realized.
And that's the beauty of it.
Let me take you back one final time to Bodh Gaya. Imagine standing beneath the Bodhi tree, the same fig tree that has stood for over 2,500 years. Imagine the dawn breaking on the 49th day. Imagine a human being, completely still, completely present, completely aware. And in that stillness, in that awareness, the entire universe being comprehended clearly for the first time. Suffering understood. Its cause understood. Its cessation understood. The path to liberation understood.
What a moment.
What a moment indeed. And from that moment, a ripple spread outward, through the teachings, through the Sangha, through Ashoka's missionary work, through the Silk Road, through centuries of dedicated practitioners like Ananda, and finally to us, sitting here, hearing these teachings, having the opportunity to walk the path ourselves.
Until our next journey through time.
Until our next journey through time, keep history alive and keep awakening alive. Remember that the path the Buddha discovered is still open. Remember Ananda, whose quiet service made it possible. Remember the middle way. Remember the Four Noble Truths. And most importantly, remember that within you lies the same capacity for awakening that awakened in a human being beneath a fig tree 25 centuries ago.
That's so cool.
It truly is.
This has been the story of Buddha's enlightenment. 7 continents, one story.